From a Chinese spy working in the state government of New York for over a decade, to a Chinese billionaire disappearing with the aid of secret Chinese police stations, this is the story of Chinese espionage. Now, on January 28, 2017, Zhao Zhihua is sitting in his apartment at the luxurious Four Seasons Hotel in Hong Kong. He was among the richest men in China until he fled in 2013 after falling out of favor with the big boys, aka the Chinese Communist Party. Shortly before this, he had deep connections with the family of Xi Jinping, the undisputed leader of China. He even used the company he co-founded to help the brother and sister of Xi Jinping's wife to dispose of some of their assets, as rich people do. But at some point, this all went wrong, which is pretty much the worst thing that can happen to you as a wealthy Chinese person. And cause for his detention came out in 2013, which caused him to flee to Hong Kong. And around this time, he purchased property in Canada and acquired a Canadian citizenship, probably so he'd never have to face the music back home, but it just wasn't enough. On this day in January, surrounded by his troop of female bodyguards, either 5 or 6 plainclothes agents from the mainland appeared at his unit for a meeting with him. After this, he was led away from the hotel with 2 of his bodyguards, and then according to some sources, he was whisked away across the border back into China in a wheelchair with his head covered, likely knocked unconscious by these Chinese agents. Once he arrived back in China, he was brought up on charges of fraud and corruption and was sentenced to 13 years in Chinese prison. Now, you may have heard about the strange disappearances of Chinese billionaires from other YouTube channels, and you may have even heard about the secret Chinese police stations found to be operating in New York City by the FBI. But have you ever tried to connect the dots between the two? And if the Chinese government can do this, what else have they gotten away with right under our noses? According to Safeguard Defenders, a human rights organization based in Madrid that monitors disappearances in China, from 2014 to 2022, at least 10,000 Chinese nationals were forcibly removed or kidnapped from foreign countries and returned back to China as part of an operation called Fox Hunt, which is insane and probably illegal. Allegedly, this operation was created to target Chinese citizens that left the mainland and then began to criticize the CCP, which they don't take lightly in case you were wondering. And I, as an American citizen, in fact, might be ruining the possibility of any future trip I might plan to China just by making this video. Anyway, in 2023, the FBI announced that 2 American citizens were arrested in New York for opening and operating an illegal overseas police station, Harry Jianwang and Chen Jinping. And there's at least 100 of these covert police stations worldwide. Now, what is extraordinary rendition? It is a state-sponsored abduction by a foreign country, and the best-known example of this is probably when Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, hunted down an SS officer that escaped to Argentina and flew him back to stand trial in Jerusalem. But of course, no one used this policy more than the CIA. Now, the Chinese government says these secret police stations only exist to act as some sort of consulate that provides services to Chinese nationals living abroad, like providing you a plane ride back to China to face charges if you ever get out of line. Although this is a clear violation of human rights and national sovereignty, since, most of these other countries don't want secret Chinese police stations in them, I must admit that I am impressed with the level of espionage I've gone over so far, and definitely the things we will cover later in this video. Although relaxing in a foreign country, thinking you have finally escaped your homeland's reach only to wake up to spies at your door who are going to take you back against your will is a terrifying prospect, I must admit that I love a good spy story. I know as an American citizen that if I ever pissed off the CIA and FBI and then fled to a foreign country, I would pretty much spend the rest of my entire existence looking over my shoulder just waiting for a similar thing to happen. And despite the known existence of these secret police stations, most of them are still in operation today. Now, the first time I heard of one of these being mentioned was of course the station in Manhattan, and that's how we get into a Chinese operative being hired to work alongside the governor of New York while the Chinese Communist Party pay for her lavish lifestyle in return for influence at the highest levels of government in New York, as well as, of course, inside information. Now, let's get into Linda Sun. How she became acclimated with the Chinese government is just as mysterious as the 2 men in New York, as they were all 3 U.S. citizens. Now, it's funny that one of her first big appointments was when she was chosen to be the chief of staff to Grace Meng, while she was a member of the New York State Assembly. Grace was born and raised in Queens to a Taiwanese-American family, as her father, before coming to the U.S., actually fled to Taiwan in opposition to the Chinese Communist Party. And one of the things Linda will be accused of is blocking interaction between Taiwan and the governor's office. If you don't know the difference between China and Taiwan, here's a brief rundown. They do not get along. Why? Well, when the communists took over China, the government of China that was fighting them had to flee the mainland to the island of Formosa, also known as Taiwan. So basically, the government in Taiwan saw themselves as the legitimate government of China, and of course the CCP said that they were the legitimate government of China, and most of the world was kind of on Taiwan's side until it became clear they had no real chance of ever retaking the mainland. Then everyone pretty much agreed that Taiwan is only the legitimate government of, well, Taiwan. Anyway, she moved up from there to the Director of External Affairs in the Economic Department, then to the Department of Financial Services, before finally becoming the Deputy Chief of Staff for the New York State Governor. Meaning that in the governor's chamber, for a little over a year, she was the second most senior member of staff. It was only after all this time that she was finally removed once the governor discovered evidence of misconduct. Now, I'm not sure what this misconduct they found was, but it probably has something to do with the mansion she owned on Long Island with the Ferrari, Range Rover, and a Mercedes parked in the driveway. She had a personal chef, and the FBI alleges that she and her husband were paid millions of dollars, which probably tipped off the IRS. And they were also provided all expenses paid trips to China, with everything being in exchange for covertly promoting the Chinese agenda in the New York State government. Here we have a woman that was raised in the United States, acting as some kind of sleeper agent that infiltrated the government of the state where the United Nations is headquartered. Arguably the most important state in America, politically. This isn't the Iowa state government or Nebraska. This is New York, the Empire State. Sorry, Iowa and Nebraska people. Didn't mean for you to catch a stray, but you get what I'm saying. And this is the least of what China has done to American intelligence, because from 2010 to 2012, they completely dismantled the CIA's network in China, killing and or capturing anywhere from 18 to 30 operatives. And it wasn't until over a decade later in 2023 that the director of the CIA stated that the agency had finally made progress in rebuilding its intelligence network. Something to this magnitude hadn't happened since the Cold War with the Soviet Union, and most of us didn't even know it happened. But of course, the dismantling of the CIA in China is information for another video, as that would be a huge rabbit hole to go down. But as of 2025, Linda Sun is out on $1 million bond, which is insane to think that if the FBI truly believes she's a spy, they don't believe she's a flight risk. But I guess the feds control the airports, so where can she really go? It's not like the Chinese government could arrange for her to fly out on fake identification, right? Maybe hack some of the facial recognition software in JFK Airport? I don't know. But that's all I got for now. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I'll see you next time.